Tonight, we welcome the writer and editor, Laurie Woolever, who has written about food and travel for the New York Times, GQ, Food and Wine, Lucky Peach, Descent, Roads and Kingdoms, and others, and has worked as an editor at Art Culinaire and Wine Spectator. She spent nearly a decade assisting Anthony Bourdain, with whom she co-authored Appetites, a cookbook, and World Travel, both New York Times bestsellers. She is also the New York Times bestselling author of Bourdain, the definitive oral biography. Tonight, she will speak with us about her incredible new memoir, Care and Feeding. She will be joined in conversation by Reem Kassis, who is a Palestinian writer and author of the best-selling and award-winning cookbooks The Palestinian Table in 2017 and The Arabesque Table in 2021, and the children's book We Are Palestinian in 2023. Her writing regularly appears in the New York Times, The Atlantic, The Wall Street Journal, and The Washington Post, in addition to various news outlets, magazines, and academic journals. We are clearly in for a great discussion tonight. Please join me in welcoming Laurie Woolever and Reem Kassis.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming out. I'm going to start out with a short reading from the book. It's from the very first chapter of the book, and it's called Hayseed. "You look like a complete fucking hayseed," said the man conducting the job interview. "What's your story?" "My story is fuck you," I thought, then forced a polite little laugh and said, "I guess my story is that I just graduated from college and I want to be a writer." It was 1996. The Unabomber was in custody, the US economy was unstoppable, and all the girls were dancing to the AOL dial-up modem sound, wearing Wonder Bras and clear acetate pumps. I didn't think I was a hayseed until this man said it, but then it felt painfully true. Sitting in this man's office, I was unaware of the actual visible seeds in my hair, picked up earlier that day on the sprawling campus of Brooklyn Botanic Garden, BBG, where I was an intern. I wore an ill-fitting navy blue pantsuit, which constituted the entirety of my job interview wardrobe. Each morning, while I raked and mulched and mowed and weeded outdoors, the suit's synthetic fabric greedily absorbed all the complicated scents inside the BBG employee locker room. In college, I had tried to obscure my small-town roots with various gestures of world weariness, reading Anais Nin, smoking unfiltered cigarettes, getting diagnosed with mild clinical depression. But here in Midtown Manhattan, the man across the desk saw me for who I was, a shy, soft-bodied 22-year-old with a limited skill set. He may not have seen that I loved getting drunk and high and watching cable television, that I wanted a creatively fulfilling career and to be passionately loved, or at least lavishly validated, and had no idea what to do about it. After multiple fruitless interviews like this one, during which there were typing tests to fail and unanswerable questions about my strengths, weaknesses, and proficiency with Lotus 123 and Excel, I got offered a receptionist job at a financial recruiting firm, whatever that meant. They told me that the opportunity was contingent on my joining a gym, which I realized was code for losing weight, so I passed. I didn't yet understand why I had to be thinner, which is to say more attractive, to answer phones and open mail in an office full of men. I then had 2 promising interviews for a household cook job, first with an agency rep and then with the employer, who then hired someone with more experience. It was all quietly excruciating, especially having to go back to BBG each morning and weed whack along Flatbush Avenue, while people drove by, occasionally throwing full diapers or almost empty drink cans out their car windows. I was living in an illegal basement apartment in deep South Brooklyn, beneath my landlord's own sprawling Victorian house, which he shared with his wife, their 2 teenagers, and a golden retriever named Billy, who was friendly and sweet, but also a loud and unpredictable nighttime barker. The best thing about the apartment was the rent, which was $350 a month. The bathroom was spacious and well lit, with pleasing pink tiles, and a pink toilet and sink, which I liked very much. The worst thing about it was everything else, especially that it was presently my home, inhabited by me. The apartment was only marginally apartment-like, with weak fluorescent lighting mounted into a drop ceiling, held up by unpainted cinder block walls. The spiders were bold and numerous. The mice were timid, but made their numbers known by their copious leavings. It was, as befits a basement, dark and damp, even during the hottest and driest summer afternoons. On move-in day, my older sister drove me and my stuff down from our parents' house upstate, and within 10 minutes of our arrival, she had an allergy attack so intense that she could barely breathe. She left, wheezing heavily, while most of my stuff was still stacked in the driveway. Shortly after I moved in, there was a heavy rainstorm that sent rivulets of dirty water under the bolt-locked back door and into the nearby closet where I'd stacked my winter clothes and shoes and some books. Eventually, the puddles subsided, but never having experienced a flood, I didn't fully grasp that all of my shit had gotten wet and would soon be engulfed by mildew. There was no separate means of egress to the basement. To get in or out, I had to pass through the family's living room and front door. I tried to be discreet and polite with my comings and goings. Even the one Sunday morning following an after-hours party at an East Village club called Save the Robots, where I discovered how much more vodka I could drink while on cocaine. My new jeans were wet with my own fresh pee, and I crept inside clutching a handbag into which I'd quietly vomited bile and peach-flavored Snapple on the train from Manhattan. The landlord himself was neither discreet nor polite. One weekday morning, as I exited up the stairs and through the living room to the front door on my way to work, he was right there, a few feet from the basement door, naked except for his flip-flops, fastening a collar and leash around Billy the dog's furry golden neck. I said nothing, didn't make eye contact, just kept going, down the steps and onto the sidewalk, muttering, oh my God," over and over, until I got to the subway platform. Again, this was 1996. I didn't have a cell phone, so it was just me, talking to myself about having seen my landlord's flaccid dick bobbling weakly in the morning light. I wondered if he'd had a robe close at hand as I waited for the train. I thought about his long balls and his droopy little boobs as I raked up cut grass. I thought again, just briefly, about his wrinkly dick during my lunch break when I took a stack of quarters to the employee payphone and called my answering machine to see if my recent manic resume faxing would yield any new interviews or offers. There were no messages, which made me feel like a bit of a failure. I didn't yet understand that while I was lonely and broke, insecure and underemployed and without a clear vision of what success might look like, I was actually doing okay. I was alive and I had a bachelor's degree. I had seen an unwanted dick in an unexpected place, so now I had that story to tell. I had an apartment and a job, such as they were. I had my friend and classmate Alejandro, who lived in Manhattan and already knew, from his adventures in the after-hours scene, how to get and, crucially, share cocaine. And I already knew that when drug sick and still drunk on the train, it was best to vomit into your handbag if you had the option. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Laurie, for that very interesting excerpt from the book, which is actually the intro, the beginning of the book.
Yes.
Many of you, actually most of you don't know this, but Laurie has a very special place in my heart. She is the reason that Anthony Bourdain blurred my first cookbook, the reason that I probably have cookbooks that did well. But tonight, it's not about me. Tonight, it's about Laurie finally telling us her story after she has spent years and years and years shaping other people's. So, Let's just acknowledge something up front, which I think if you heard her excerpt now, you probably know that if you got this book expecting a tell-all about the time that she worked with Batali or Bourdain, this book is so much more than that. It is more deep, it is more raw, it is more personal. And I guess my question for you, Laurie, is, did you think about that when you started out writing? Like, were you concerned with what the reaction or the response would be to a book that is purely your story, or did you think, screw it, this is my story, it's my time to tell it, and that's the way it's going to be?
Well, I don't know that my thought was either one of those two necessarily, but what I knew is that I had a story to tell, or I had a lot of stories to tell. I had lived a lot of life in 25 years, from the end of college until the end of 2021, which is where the narrative leaves off. And some of my story intersected with some very big personalities, very famous people who had a lot of legibility in the world. So it would have been disingenuous to tell my story without also talking about those interactions and those experiences with those two sort of bookends of my career, Mario Batali and Anthony Bourdain. But I knew that some people would, I think once you play the hits, they want you to keep playing the hits, right? So I wrote a book, I created a book called Bourdain, The Definitive Oral Biography, that came out in 2021. And then there was someone else wrote a book about Tony, and then someone else did. And then there was a documentary that I participated in. And I think there is a deep appetite for stories and information and people trying to understand the life and death of Tony Bourdain. So I can understand that someone might come to this book wanting that, looking for that. And I'm not breaking any news, but I am telling the parts of my story that Tony intersected with, and the ways that he really helped me as a boss. And the same with Mario. It's not a tell-all about Mario, but it's about my few years working as his assistant and what I learned and what I saw.
So you mentioned Anthony Bourdain, and obviously you've been associated a lot with him throughout your career. But since his passing, you've also kind of come into your own, right? You wrote the biography, now you're writing your own book. And yet last week or 2 weeks ago, there was an article in the New York Times, and the headline was, Bourdain and Batali's assistant spill some secrets. I mean, as a woman, I personally was offended by this. Like, why do you have to associate and label women purely based on the men that they have worked with? Or I understand they, like you said, they are bookends, big figures, et cetera, but you are doing work in your own right. Mm-hmm. With that said, Anthony Bourdain was such a great and influential figure. We were just talking about that backstage. But for better or worse, you have been very tethered to him in the public eye.
Yeah.
Is that something that, you find frustrating, something that you've come to terms with, that you embrace? How do you feel about it?
I don't think it's frustrating. I think it's a very, someone like Tony casts a very long shadow, and I don't know that it's ever something that you can outrun or not necessarily even would want to. Yeah, I want to be known as a writer in my own right, and that's part of the reason why I wrote this book. But I wouldn't be the writer that I am without Tony, right? And I think there are probably some people here tonight that also worked with him, and can probably say the same thing. Looking at one right now, that it's what a privilege and a pleasure to be associated with someone that did the kind of work that he did. When he died, we all had to figure out what our individual paths were forward to keep making work that hopefully he would be proud of. So, yeah, I think it's. I could do something completely different. I could go, get a job at the post office, or I could go, I don't know, get an OnlyFans or something that would be, that would definitely sever that connection. But, I'm 50 years old. I'm not doing either of those things.
So it's a valuable connection as well. I mean,
yes, yeah, and it's the people that I've met, the experiences I've had, the opportunities, because of a name like Tony's that opens the door. It's, it's a dance. There's a difference between making work that's inspired by the things that I learned from him, and telling my stories, and then sort of riding coattails, and I would like to avoid the second scenario.
Got it. So you mentioned that you wrote a lot of the books or a couple of books that came out with Tony, and we were just talking backstage about how much ghostwriting goes on in the food world in general. And the more senior you get, the more you have people who are co-authoring with you or even just writing the whole thing for you. So after so much time basically trying to really accurately channel people's voices onto paper, and I think you still sometimes do that now, what was the process like, or how did it feel to finally get your voice on the page? And I think the memoir has been described as hilarious and devastating. So is that you? Is that you on the page, or?
I would like to think I'm funny. I don't know if I'm devastating, but devastatingly funny. It feels great. I mean, it feels really great to be completely in charge of what the words are that go on the page, and to be not trying to help someone else tell their story, but to tell my own story. Yeah, like unequivocally amazing, great experience. Like,
so it was easy for you, like your voice just.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, easy. It's not easy to write a book, but yeah, it feels great. I would love to do it again, but unfortunately, I used up my whole life in this book, so I need to do some more stuff and write another one.
See more naked guys before you.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody show me their dick. Please don't.
No. While we're on the subject of personal stuff, let's flip it, and I'm going to ask you something a little more personal, because throughout the book you share very deeply intimate experiences that you've had. I mean, there was the Tokyo, I don't know if you guys have read the book or not yet, but there was the incident of the nipple biting in the Tokyo hotel. There was drinking gin from a dog bowl with Jack. There was the infidelities, abortion, substance abuse. That's very personal, very deep, very heavy. How did you decide, was the process like to think, I'm going to put this in there or I'm going to take it out? Were there things off limits? Obviously, you have a son, right, who might read these things. You have family, you have friends. What was it like navigating that?
Yeah, it's an essay question. I mean, there are a lot of things that I did, decisions I made, and ways that I behaved that I'm not proud of, that I shared in the book because I felt it was important to be honest about. I would not say this is an addiction memoir, but it kind of is, and I don't blame alcoholism for the decisions that I made, but certainly didn't help to be. I definitely used alcohol as a sort of liquid courage, but speaking more broadly, I think it's just important to be really honest. And the books that I like to read, the memoirs in particular, are where the author is really sharing all the good and bad, and I always feel very comforted when I see that someone else has made a bad decision, and I'm interested in the consequences, and I'm interested in seeing them grow and learn and change to go from one place to another. So that's not really possible in this story, in my telling of it, if I don't say, this is where I started. These are all the bad decisions I made along the way. It also, honestly, it makes for entertaining storytelling to say, I did this wild thing, and I don't feel great about it. It's a little embarrassing, but I did it, and let me see if I can make you laugh when I, tell this story. As far as the question about family members, there's some sensitive, embarrassing things that. Frankly, if my mom were still around, I'm not sure I would have written this book, or I wouldn't have written the book in this way. My dad is still around, and he's sort of on the fence about whether or not he'll read it. He understands that there's stuff that's going to feel weird to know about me, and I also feel that way. But I didn't want to make that stop me. I didn't want to stop myself from writing these stories for fear of, embarrassing my dad. And as far as my son, he's 16 years old. He could not be less interested in anything I do that doesn't involve making him a burrito or transferring money onto his debit card. So he is. He may read it at some point, but not anytime soon.
Yeah, I think what you said about your dad is in and of itself inspiring, that you're not going to let that stop you from telling the story. So what have people's reactions been to the book has been out not that long yet, but are people telling you, this has helped me, or this is...
Yeah, I've gotten some really nice messages from people that I know and people that I don't know, saying, I've been clean and sober for X amount of time, and I could really relate to your story, or I worked in the industry, the food industry, for a long time, and a lot of these stories really resonate with me. Or I was a really big fan of Tony Bourdain, and I really love seeing these little aspects of his personality and your interaction. So I've gotten really nice feedback. As I was saying to you backstage, I learned from previous experiences, I'm not reading the comments. I'm not looking for myself on Reddit. I got rid of my Google alert. But to be honest, if anybody is talking about this book, if it's getting attention, if it's moving people to have a discussion with other people online, that's great. But I think I'm still a sensitive little baby and don't want people to say mean things about me. So if they're saying them, it's not my business, and I'm not going to go looking for it.
Good for you. I think that's a good strategy. You mentioned alcohol in the previous answer. You said it wasn't an excuse, but it kind of was also part of the reason you made some of these mistakes. And then you talk towards the end of your book about your cousin Brian's death from alcohol. Mm-hmm. Was that the wake-up call for you, or was it a series of things?
Yeah, no, it was not the wake-up call, but it was definitely a data point that I think probably led me in the direction of deciding to stop drinking. But it took another few years after that. I think 2 years after he died. It was shocking to me. He was someone that I had sort of lost touch with, and he had really, had a very different kind of struggle with alcohol and a lot more consequences than I suffered. So it was another sort of turn in the road for me to see that someone I knew and loved could die from this disease.
Let's move it back a bit to work, less heavy personal stuff.
Let's tell some jokes.
But you talk in the context of work, you talk about your experiences with Batali. You mentioned the incident on the